Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on an introduction into two new features for the AnyLogic Cloud, both the completed runs view as well as the SSO implementation. A few housekeeping items before we get started. So for today's webinar, we do have a few resources that we'll be referencing between example models and some instructions as well. All of these links and files can be found inside of the Zoom panel. If you go to your bottom panel, you'll see the resources button. Feel free to click on that and you'll be able to see everything under the links page. And at any point during the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us via either the webinar Zoom chat feature or the Q&A section. Because at the end of the webinar, we will be taking some time to address any open questions that anyone might have. So please allow me just a moment to pull up my screen. So today we'll be going over giving a quick review of what AnyLogic Cloud is, just as a refresher for everybody, as well as introduction into some of the new features that have been recently developed and released for the software, as well as a demonstration of said new features, in particular step-by-step demo of how we implement SSO authentication for our private cloud installation. So starting off the bat, we always categorize the life cycle of simulation models into two phases. There's the creation side of things, where we're actually building the model, developing the logic, integrating and connecting all of the important data that we'd like to. And then once we're finished developing the model, we then want to deploy and use it and actually create, design, and run all of these experiments such that we can analyze all of their outputs and allow us to make decisions based off of the simulation results. And it is very common that the person who is developing the model, the simulation developer, isn't always the decision maker, the end-all be-all person who consumes and decides based off of the output of the simulation what plan of action they're going to have moving forward. We refer to those as the end users. Think of your data analysts, your managers of facilities, or logistical managers and operators as well, the people who need to get their hands on these models to make said decisions. And we have bridged the gap between the development ecosystem, between the developers and the end users via our AnyLogic private cloud, or as you could think of it as a model manager, a way to have a repository to keep all these simulation models and deliver them to any number of end users without, let's say, all of these end users requiring respective licenses inside of the local AnyLogic model editor. They can essentially access any number of these models all through a web browser, as AnyLogic private cloud would be installed on premises, whether it be physical servers, virtual servers, through cloud providers, and it's compatible with pretty much every major cloud provider, from Google Cloud to, of course, AWS, Oracle Cloud, and GCP. And of course, something very important to any of these live deployable models, let's say, especially in regards to any digital twin-like models that you want to have, is that any existing data that you might have connected to your model, or maybe even your own solutions or business intelligence systems that have been incorporated and implemented into your AnyLogic model, all of those connections and utilities are still maintained within the simulation model after it's been uploaded. And with this software, it really allows you to deploy what we call enterprise, or utilize what we call enterprise simulation, a set of deployed models that you want to be allowed to be accessed pretty much on the fly whenever users might need them to solve, I need to analyze what the next hour is going to look like, what the next day, what the next week, or the next month. I need to be able to use this tool on the fly to allow me to make decisions based off the simulation results at need. And some of the high level features and things that the private cloud can do, you could think of it as a secure and central repository for all these models that you want to be able to deliver to any number of end users. And in particular, you don't have to worry about, let's say, version control when you're exporting just Java applications. Like, I don't have to worry about version control because I can just have this single repository that I can deliver this model to any number of users, make the changes that I need to without, let's say, having to update everybody's individual models that I shared with them, just that one single repository. And of course, because this is installed on a cloud-based platform, you could essentially think of it as a central runtime powerhouse environment. I have a developer laptop in front of me that has some pretty powerful hardware to get these models done at a relatively good time. But, let's say I have a model that takes quite a bit of time to make a completed run because I'm simulating maybe months or years into the future. And I don't want to, say, tank my own laptop's hardware and just run it all in the cloud, or even have to necessarily worry about, let's say, the system requirements of the respective end users. And of course, within the software, you have the ability to quickly build and run, whether it be single run or multi-run experiments. They're all going to be accessed and created and all through your web browser, even to the point that I could take out my cell phone if I'd like and run my simulations off of just the Google Chrome from my cell phone. And of course, as previously mentioned, you can easily share these models, whether it be to specific users' email, all registered users within the cloud environment, or I could even do something easier, is just sharing a model link. Actually, we'll be doing that today for you guys for the example model we'll be covering. And AnyLogic Cloud, also, you could think of it as a backend tool, because on top of any model that you upload, you also get extensive API access to the model. So anything that you essentially see performed today within the model experiments UI, it could be done programmatically through the API. You could, easiest example I always give is, let's say I prefer analyzing all of my data through Tableau. I want to work with the simulation model, but just through Tableau and take all the data from its outputs onto my Tableau server. I can essentially have a button that I design that speaks to the model in the background, runs that simulation, and feeds all the data back to my Tableau server. And last but not least, the newest feature of this software is the ability to save and track and view all results of any simulation run you ever do. So for many years, part of the AnyLogic private cloud software, of one of its capabilities, is that it would save all previous model runs that have ever been performed. This is a way of saving from having to do redundant runs and be able to quickly view the results. But now with the new all runs or completed runs view chart, you have the ability to easily view every single one of those respective runs. And on that note, let's kind of discuss what those new features entail and what they can really do for you in some quick demonstrations. So starting off with the completed runs view, it is a new table that is available in every single model that you have uploaded. If you go to your experiments view, you can now see right next to your experiments tab, you now have the completed runs tab, and allows users to, not just the developers, but any end users who access this model as well, to quickly track and analyze and filter and sort through the results of every single model run that has ever been formed, all within inside of this conveniently formatted table. And mind you, when I say all experiments, I mean every single one, through every type of experiment that's being run, whether it be through the cloud user interface or through API. This essentially allows you to easily have insights into all possible outcomes of your simulation model. And one quick thing to note of is it is going to be tied to specific versions of your model. So here you can see within this example, we're on version 17 of this distribution center, which means technically speaking, I have 17 tables worth of completed run views across all the different versions. But of course, mind you, we just, for this example, would want to work with the most recent version. And anytime you execute, whether it be the single run experiment, multi-run, Monte Carlo, optimization, any and all simulation models will all be available in all simulation runs, pardon me, will be available within this table run view. And this always allows you to easily track through the data. It's not just a view of, hey, here's sort through the list and find the results you're looking for. You have ways to sort and filter through it, expand the respective results of a particular run. And of course, you can also have the ability to, well, pardon me, you always had the ability to download your single run results, whether it be to an Excel file or a JSON file that's more convenient for all runs or multi-run experiments. But you even now have the ability to take this entire table and export it as an Excel file so you can just easily view it in other formats. And let's actually take a look at this. I have an example model here that is right now uploaded on our public cloud. So anyone that goes on cloud.anylogic.com and looks up consumer credit webinar, you can actually take a look at this model and everything I'll be reviewing with you today. We should have a link that will be available in the resources as well, so you can go straight to the model without having necessarily to search through it. But within this particular example, and just to give you a bit of background, it is a simulation of a bank, in particular loan applications at a particular bank where people come in, they have different ways of applying for their bank loans. It has to go through the different application processes for, sending their application in, has to be inspected. And of course, there's a result. Was there no decision, positive decision, or negative? In the case of this model, the big experiment, if you will, is, I want to take a look at all the different staffing levels that I have available to me that are the different resources that essentially help along the process for each of these different loan application sections. So for this model, we've already created experiments such as, let's just have variation of all the staff. Let me test out all the different combinations and view what results they have and the effects that's going to have on the time and system, to even things like Monte Carlo, where what happens when the application ratio is a lot more random and not such a static probability, and is going to be possibly different for every single individual user that comes in the system. And of course, the base experiments of playing with all the, different inputs, running them, seeing what the outcome is. And of course, last but not least, we have optimization as well, where we just want the AnyLogic Cloud to find a solution for us to play around with the different number of staff that we have available to find an objective function, which in this case is minimize the time and system for a positive result, while also making sure that the number of abandoned applications, which abandoned being people had to wait too long for a staffing member to proceed them along the process, so they just give up and try another bank. And failure or success is more dependent on our individual clients, but what we care about is still seeing everybody that goes through the process. So here I have my optimized inputs. the results, then I'm pleased. I don't see any abandoned, and all the different time analytics. But let's say I wanted a bit more of a view of all the possible outcomes. Like I'm pleased with these optimized results, but let's actually take a look at the completed runs in every single possible run that this model has been performed. As you can see, it's quite a long list. There's probably going to be a couple or a few hundred, so I won't go down the whole chart here just to get to the very bottom, because we're gonna be here all day just going down the chart. But I have the ability to choose any of these individual runs, expand it accordingly to see all of their respective outputs. I can minimize that back and scroll down the line to maybe I don't care about all the outputs. I just care about one of the respective charts. And I just want to take a look at all of the results. And even if maybe, because a big part of this particular model is I have parameterized the rate schedule of the client arrival all via Excel. So even what if somebody did something different and these client rate names had a bit more brevity for location and time and date. So I can have a bit more, well, what was this run in this section and this specific predicted client rate? But some of the things I can do is let's actually take a look more at the results. In this case, I really cared about minimizing the time and system and trying to get them through as much as they could. But let's say I really want to hammer in on what does that look like. So I can take any of these results, and in this case, let's actually sort them in descending to see what setups were happening for the lowest time in system. And what maybe was going on with these specific experiments, what were its particular outcomes, and maybe time and system is very important to us, but also I have to remember abandon is even more critical because that's 45% of all of our clients that we missed a potential opportunity just because we didn't have enough. So maybe using a metric of minimizing time and system isn't going to be the smartest move. And I can even do other things as well. Maybe I want to double check what happens when the app ratio is at over a certain threshold, when it's greater than, we'll call it 60% of all clients that come through the system. That's the results I really want to look at and I don't want to bother with. And actually, we'll do a reverse of this since I have so many 0.8s. Do this one more time. We'll actually see how many runs I did where it was less than 0.8. And here we can now see my filtered out list of, all right, this is helping me understand when the app ratio is a bit more random, what the particular results can be. And I can really analyze and dig down and make my decisions and trust that I know I'm seeing all possible outcomes. I no longer, let's say, have to go back to my experiment and try this and try that and try this. Everything is saved for you. So a big thing with this private cloud environment for especially distributing these models to a number of end users is authorization. So right now in the AnyLogic private cloud, currently you have a few options for how you manage the logins and accessibility for all these models for all of your end users. There is a built-in just normal email interface where I could go to any private cloud and I could decide I'm going to just sign up, use my work email, decide a login and enter some password that I decide. But that's not necessarily always the way we want to control and track all of our users. And maybe there's some other authentications we want to do. In particular, what if, as utilizing the current implementations, what if I want to have all my users handled by an LDAP server and or an Active Directory? And right now, both of these authentication option for our AnyLogic Cloud users is currently available. But the newest feature that we have just added to this is single sign-on. So, let's say I just want to use one single email and don't have to want to track all these different logins and, just like what a lot of us like to do for convenience sake. Oh, I can sign it with my Google account. I could sign it with my Google account. I don't have to create all these logins and passwords and track them all. I have this one email that tracks everything for me accordingly, just to make user management a bit easier for the administrators. So for implementing the SSO, which is what we're actually going to be demonstrating how to do today on the private cloud itself, actually be going step by step of integrating one of these options for us. But some of the requirements before you would get started on utilizing the SSO is first, you're going to need an OAuth provider, whether it be one of the bigger ones, such as Microsoft Entra ID, Okta, Ping1, Keycloak, Google, which is actually the one we'll be demonstrating and utilizing today. But potentially, if you don't see yours on the list, almost any OAuth 2.0 or OpenID Connect compatible identity provider should and will most probably likely be compatible with the private cloud. And for any of you cloud users out there who don't see yours on the list, we at the support team are always willing to, help you and work with you and, get any of our cloud user feedback on, the different providers you might want to use. Some of the other things you're going to need, your user account data should include the field containing their emails. And at a minimum, your identity provider should return the following data fields or their respective analogs. We're going to need a client ID, a client secret, a scope, and a secret URI. Now, it's a little contextually different between the providers, but these are sort of the four major big ones that is pretty typical across all of them. And last but not least, you are, of course, going to need administrative access to the instance or machine that the cloud software has been installed on, because today we'll actually be going into the configuration files themselves to be pointing to our OAuth provider and also changing how our cloud operates to make sure that the only way people can access and log into our private cloud is through their SSO. Like, I don't want guest access. I don't want people just registering emails wherever they'd like. So let's actually implement SSO in my private cloud utilizing Google OAuth. So I have a private cloud that's just installed on an AWS instance that I've created for the sake of this webinar. And I've set up my client ID for a web application via Google Cloud. So just, one of the potential things I'm going to need. So before I get started by going back to the private cloud, there's a few things I want to make sure I do within this particular OpenID client ID. So one thing I want to do, I want to make sure my URL for the authorized JavaScript origins essentially has the domain for where my private cloud is. It should actually be S, and this should be S, as well as the authorized redirect URIs, which in normal in particular by default is simply the domain or IP for your private cloud and just the path API OAuth Google. This is something that we'll be referencing in the configuration files. Now, a couple of other things we're going to need is our client ID and our client secrets. And the reason why we're going to need all that is because we're going to need to go into, as I said, the configuration files both one called registration.json as well as OAuth.json. Now, mind you, everything we'll be doing today is just off of the instructions that are publicly available. The link for this, if you'd like to follow along, should be is inside of our resources tab for this webinar. And where you might find these authorization, registration, and OAuth files, they're all inside of the configuration files folder, which for anyone whom is not familiar, you can also, they're all located by default in home, ALC, ADM, ALC. So this is just the default path to find all of the configuration files that even if I want to, what I notice here, I have details and descriptions of all of the possible ones. Even here, you could see one of the examples of what an OAuth JSON might look like when it's connected to the ping1 identity provider. So going back to the instructions. So of course, starting off, we want to go to the website of our identity provider, which in this case is just my Google client. So because I'm going to need these credentials. And I want to make a new integration. Now, these specific vetted settings are going to vary by your specific provider. Even one reasons why I went with the Google choice is because it's a bit simpler to create and add. So, not all of these steps have to be done for every single provider. It's going to be contextual by which one you are using. And make sure that whenever you're setting up your redirect URL, the one that we saw here within setting up for my Google web application OpenID, we just want to make sure that we always have the private cloud instance address, or more often domain, and everything is going to be in HTTPS. SSO does not work unless you're utilizing HTTPS, which could be, going a little off topic, you can have your own key and certificate, or maybe you have yours sitting behind a load balancer, like as I would have in my AWS instance. So once you have all that information, we just have to go to the directory and open these respective configuration files. And over here, I've already connected to the back end of my instance, where I'm going to go to where those particular files going to have to reconnect for some reason. Make everybody's life easier, so everyone, including myself, can actually read what's happening. Perfect. Let's clean this up for everybody. Okay, so once again, I have it all in the default. I'm actually just going to make my life a little bit easier by just copying and pasting and CDing straight into that path. Or it might help if I was... I swear everybody did have this ready. So, for that, as you can see, here's where all those configuration files, once again, the two we care about in this instance are going to be the OAuth and the registration. Now, I'm going to we're going to start with the registration file. And I'm going to use Nano for a text editor. You could use VI, any text editor that you'd like, just using Nano for the sake of convenience. As you can see here, we have everything by default. right now, it's enabled for guest access, which the default of this is actually true. But I can easily say, well, right now, we're not going to use the AnyLogic provider. We're going to get rid of that. And from the different options we have, we're going to use OAuth. Now here, for example, if we did LDAP or AD, or maybe a combination of, yes, I still want to allow people to use the basic AnyLogic email and registration, but for the sake of this example, no, I only want users going through OAuth SSO only. And also I want to get rid of that guest access because that kind of goes against the lines of SSO only. So I'm going to change this from true to false. Once I have that all set up, and I don't really need to change anything else with the password policy or anything like that, I'm just going to save it, exit out. And then the next thing we want to do is alter our OAuth JSON. Now, I did fill it out a little bit more, utilizing the template for the Google. So, pardon me, I'm going to go back to the instructions for just a moment here. And we're at the part where we want to open our OAuth.json file, where, as I said, it's going to be a bit contextually different depending on your different provider. But if we go down to the example configurations, you could see we have, examples ready to go for Okta, Ping, Google, and the Microsoft Entra ID. So you could easily just copy and paste these. I even typically like to work with a text editor because Nano and VI can just be a bit cumbersome sometimes over just doing an easier text editor. And so what we can do here is just copy and paste. Once again, we're utilizing Google for this example. And I have actually already just pasted it inside of my notepad. Just figured it's a bit easier over copying and pasting into the web ID. So the big things I'm going to need to do. So registration ID, Google, name Google, provider configuration, that's all going to be filled out here. So the first thing we need to do is client ID. Once again, we have all of that. That's where this information comes in. Where I'm going to copy and paste that. We need that client secret as well. I know it's not much of a secret when I'm sharing it on a webinar. This will be a short-lived thing. And we leave the scope the same, OpenID, profile, email, same with actually the attributes below. The last thing we want to do is that redirect URI. Now, it's going to just simply be HTTPS, that cloud host name, and then that path API auth Google. And actually what we can simply do here is go into the one we've made and simply copy and paste that in. Now, again, just doing this in a bit of a different format where we're actually just going to delete all of this. Just to make our lives a bit easier. So you don't have to see my awkward typing. And let's paste this in. So now, and like I said, I just prefer working in the notepad because I can do easier checking and copying and pasting and all that a bit simpler and easier. So once I'm done, I simply have to save. Come on. Save the file, which I'm going to overwrite, of course. Now, going back to the instructions really quick, we do just have one sort of final step to do. After we have specified everything, and this is kind of standard practice for any time you're changing any of the configuration files, is we need to apply those changes. We kind of have to restart, in particular, 2 of the services that keep their same configuration as they're running until, what we're gonna do here essentially is start and stop our controller and our rest, and then start the controller again. And the reason for that is that this is the way to just let the cloud know that some changes were made in the configuration, and you can't just, change while you're in the middle of running. You gotta, step off the path and, change, and then you can keep moving forward. And even from here, all we have to do now is start the controller, because luckily part of the controller's job is to start all of the remaining services. So I don't even need to have to start rest myself, because that's the controller's job. And yeah, we could see it's a little too big doing Docker PS here. But now if we actually go to that private cloud, we can now see, yes, we have the ability to log in, sign up, and we kept that guest access. But now we can actually use that SSO. That, once again, we're just going to, I can use SSO to log in, and it just takes me away from this page, redirects me to sign in through Google. I'm actually going to use my AnyLogic Tech Team at gmail.com. And there it is. And I'm already logged in. It created a profile for me. I can make some changes if I'd like to enter in some more information. It just, takes my name, and the one required field is that first name. So kind of another easier way to control and manage all of the users across this enterprise-like environment. Some of the trickiest things when we're delivering these models to hundreds and hundreds of people is, yes, we have the ability to control via the admin panel all the different accounts and view them. But of course, it can get a bit out of hand, and especially if I already have user authentication applications that I'm already utilizing, I can just incorporate them into the cloud. Why am I just adding another level on top of all the extra user authentication that I have to do? Especially with, large companies where, like I said, we're delivering these models to a large number of users, especially with keeping track of all of their respective runs too. So we're going to spend the rest of the time addressing any open questions that you guys might have. Let me take a look here. Seems like my colleagues have already been tackling a lot of your questions. So one of the questions, great question, was regarding the completing runs view. If there is a sort of particular scenario comparison. So right now, we would recommend, we do already have a completed runs view for AnyLogic. So let's actually take this experiment. I'm going to make a copy of this. We're going to just name it, for the sake of it, second scenario. But we're going to change some of the inputs to just be as different as they can from this example. Let's run that. Let's see. Just take a moment, go to the internet. And sorry, switching to another model just because I know I have this one up and ready. So take, for example, I have a model where I have different heuristics for how I'm going to route on my trucks to a dirt dumping site, and I get to analyze, what effects is it going to have on the production rate, the time and system, and all those different outcomes that I might have. What I've done here is actually separated all those potential differences to different experiments that I can, if I'd like to, hit the compare button, and I can select all of them and stack them up top of each other to sort of figure out which is the one I'm sort of the biggest fan of, which one has the highest production rate and the lowest unit cost of production. Or, right now there's all pretty close here. So maybe there's some tiny differences in the time it takes to get the number of dumps to fill its jobs. Of course, one thing to demonstrate as well, back to the completed runs view, I wanted to also, I mentioned it, but wanted to demonstrate that, we'll do that later. The ability to collect any of this data to export as that Excel file. Oh, it's having a first stage jitters, it'll be fine. So let me see any other questions. There's a great question from Rishav. If we have the ability to track all who signed into the cloud. I know there is ways through the back end of already tracking who signs into the cloud. If your different identity providers have any tracking capabilities of seeing when emails are used, what different services, those would be applicable to the cloud of what as well. And they all, I already kind of beat to Sam's question as well about how we can download the Excel file for the all runs view and what it looks like. So from here, we go to, our completed runs view. We have all of our finished runs. And on the top right, you have the download button that for some reason, my personal cloud, is complaining a little bit, so I won't be able to demonstrate the actual download. But I can go back to my PowerPoint presentation that gives a bit of a preview of what this looks like. It'll take any of the headers that you already have established, that once again, all of these are editable. We can actually even take this view, edit it. Maybe this is a little too much going on. Maybe I don't want to show this much. Maybe all I care about is, we're gonna hide you. I don't care about so much time and system. I care about the results, the time and system for positive decision, because maybe I want to make our big whale customers happy and keep them going through utilization. Maybe not as important to me. I do want to double check the client rates, differences people have made. Let's save this view. And now I have condensed it a bit more. So I can sort of clean it up and pick and choose what I want to view, what I want to decide. Now, mind you, these names are all going to be tied to the name of the respective outputs, just to have a uniformity between what all of this means. But that's going back to, I wanted to zoom out too much. Going back to that example, like I said, it just takes all the names, and in particular, it takes the current view. So right now, if I went back to the edit the view, I told it to hide the order rate, hide the rate units, hide truck capacities, pallet number types. Maybe I got rid of everything to the right here within this edit view. Your Excel file is going to be contextual to the current view that you have set up for your table. Sorry, let me take a look at other questions that we have. So there's a question on how these models will be deployed. So any and all models that get uploaded in this particular case for, let's stick with the one that you all have access to right now via the public cloud, which I can actually just share with everybody via the direct link. And right now, I, as the developer, as the owner of this model, have complete control on who gets to see it, whom can access it. Right now, I'm just like, I don't care so much. Let's just allow anyone who has access to this link to be able to touch the model. But I can also say, no, 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 no. I don't want this published. I'm not going to do it now because I want to hide this model from everybody. But I can unpublish my model and say, I want to only invite very specific users. Like maybe I am working with my colleague Gregory, and him and I are collaborating on this model together. So we would both be developers, such that if any of us makes changes to the simulation model, we had this single point repository that we could track all of our different versions. But then I can also say, my other colleague, Ryan Berger, is the user. He is the end user. He is the one individual whom this model is for to consume at their will. And the whole company doesn't need to see it. I don't want to necessarily let this whole model be available to anyone who has access to their private cloud instance. I want to direct what users have access to these models as a user. Someone who isn't going to be accessing this model and being able to configure everything and change everything under the hood, because that's not what they need. I already made this experiment for you. And even to the point of how it's going to look for most of you guys whom access this link is you're going to essentially see the end results of all the configuration that I have done. You don't have the ability as, let's say, the end user or guest, if you will, of this model to make the different experiments. You only have the ability, because this was not restricted, interesting. You only have the ability to run the experiments that I've supplied with you. Of course, change any of the inputs, change any of the inputs that includes files as well. Heck, one of the things I do for this model in particular, I always have a habit of any file as input. I always keep that default template for my input file, just so, yes, that's fine. Just, let's say I lost it or I need it, or, I want to edit it, resave it, and then download or upload, pardon me, a new copy. So let me take a look. So somebody asked, can we call the model on the cloud from an in-house web application? That is a great question. Thank you. As previously mentioned, when you have this model, and pardon me, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. I want to pull something up for everybody. So every AnyLogic model is a Java application. Under the hood, it is just a Java application. But when we upload it to the cloud, you're keeping that model, that Java application that's still runnable, still accessible via the default AnyLogic Cloud UI, which is pretty much everything that was demonstrated today. But one of the big, huge advantages you get after you upload this model is you have access to all these APIs that are essentially layered on top of the model as it's uploaded. So pretty much every experiment, everything you've seen from retrieving results, creating new experiments on the fly, changing the inputs, all of that can be done programmatically via the different API libraries that we have. Even some examples we have, JavaScript that even allows you for custom and branded web UI. You can use Java API for that earlier example I gave of, I just want to analyze all the outputs via Tableau. I don't need to see model animation. I just want to select my inputs, hit a run button, and it's going to, via the API, speak to the model as it's uploaded on the cloud, realize, oh, he wants to run a new experiment, run as fast as you can in a headless mode, and deliver the results back to him where he made the API call and populate the Tableau. So even, take for example with Python API, maybe I want a learning agent, or for one example I have a routing algorithm solver in one of my models that I've uploaded, where it's utilizing a GIS traveling salesman problem, but it is Python itself that actually helps solve the issues for all the routing. And all of these APIs and their different capabilities are all available online through our documentation. So you could see all the examples of the different APIs that you have available, what classes you have, what the classes actually do and give and return, as well as lots of examples of utilizing some of just the high level, here's how you do a simulation with progress polling, or an animated run with external results, or just retrieving information from a running model. And let's actually take a look at a demonstration of how that could look like. So I'm going to pull up a model that's been uploaded. So again, this is why we utilize SSO, too many passwords. So we have a simulation model, transporters and moving free space. For anybody who's not familiar, it is just an inside the four walls production plant, where the big thing that we want to experiment with is the number of AGVs at this facility, because they're in charge of moving items between the different workshops. And me as the simulation modeler have to decide how many AGVs, what type am I going to purchase? These used to be just humans in forklifts and with the lifter, but we want to invest in AGVs, which is going to be a big investment that I don't want to overpay, because maybe within my experiment, let's speed this up a little bit. I realized that these AGVs that I can select, the individual ones, are all idle most of the time. They're sitting around doing nothing. So we spent all this money on AGVs that aren't, keeping up to stuff. And yes, I have tons of different experiments, UIs, output sections set up to be able to view the results. But with API, I can actually have the ability to make my own customized experiment dashboard that is then actually take a snapshot, if you will, or an archive of that UI that I create via JavaScript and HTML, and allow my private cloud to host it. So let's actually take a look at that model. So once again, here's our experimentation via the default cloud UI. But if I go to here, and I'm going to use the public version for the sake of letting you guys all check it out as well. And once again, this UI you see here, this little custom website, is all just hosted by the cloud itself. And I essentially have my new parameter input page where I have a nice visual aid to click and choose and decide, the respective inputs for all the different workshops, and even maybe an overview of the more static things. Like I can't change the number of storage. That's just a physical thing that exists. And for the AGVs as well. For the default experiment page, like you have full access to change the speeds, which, interesting enough, under the hood was actually part of us deciding what AGVs we want to go to, because each type, each brand has certain speeds available to them and different turn radiuses, and some don't even necessarily turn at all. They're omnidirectional. And so I have a bit more clarity into what you are deciding when you say speed and turn radius as, parameterized inputs. And then I get to decide, do I want to take those input parameters and run it with animation, or just do parameter variation? That, mind you, these experiments might not even exist. They might not have been created yet on the page here, because what can actually happen is we could just say if an experiment doesn't exist, the API is just going to run it itself. And I'll just demonstrate the quick two examples we have here of running within a window, saving all the parameters from the previous pages that I can even change on the fly if I'd like. And I can view that simulation with the animation window that I can even control via these external buttons. And cool enough, actually, this little box plot that you see here is speaking to this live running model with animation. So sorry, I'm just going to make sure we have other questions. Yes, we got the API. Yes, there's a question, can we make some inputs partially edible? Any and all things that I have uploaded, like I can even say here, I don't want people to touch the speed of these AGVs, or even better yet, like maybe it's less to do with the delay route. I want to hide certain inputs from certain people. Maybe don't touch my workshop 2 or my 1. You can play around with 3 all you want. And I'm going to save my dashboard such that it now removes certain things. I could even say, you know, some of these are sliders, some of these are edit boxes. Depending on the different experiments you have available, you can do a series of ranges and the steps between them. For Monte Carlo, you can actually utilize distributions, uniform distributions for your input. There are ways to get in other inputs by like setting the parameters as min, max, and then under the logic hood, we just feed in those parameters into the distribution. So sorry, looking through your other questions. So if you single sign on, is it possible to view or work on a new model uploaded by my colleague or vice versa? Yes. You have, anytime you upload the model, you as the owner of the model have full access of, I can say, like I typically upload a model, nobody can see it because I want to upload it, get all my experiments set up and make it look formatted in a way that, you know, works best for my eventual end users. And then I'm going to go, once I get everything finished, I'm then going to say, maybe I don't want to just publish it to everyone who has access to this cloud. This is another version of it, which is on a physical machine in the next office. Maybe I don't want everyone to see it. I only want, you know, certain colleagues to collaborate with me, and you know, other users to just be the end user. I don't know his email off the top of my head. My other colleagues as an end user. And what that's going to mean if I do that is if somebody goes onto this cloud and tries to find this model in the public section, it's not going to show up because it's not public. It's only allowed to be viewed by some individual users. You know, even if I go into the public version of the cloud that you could see I'm signed in on, I actually have quite a few models that you're like, oh, I want to find Jeff's simple hospital AI test bed. It's just not listed publicly. So there's a few of these you might see and try to search for and find, but you're not gonna, because it's my model. Only I can see it. Until, you know, if you actually take a look at some of these top ones here, yes, you can find all of these because I've made them all publicly available to anyone whom accesses the public cloud. And that same model access when utilizing SSO is maintained. So there's a question on, is it possible to run the model in the cloud and export the data to an SQL server? Yes, I actually have an example of that. In one of my models for product delivery, it's connected to a Microsoft Azure SQL server. I also had it connected to an Amazon RDS MySQL server, or pardon me, the Microsoft one was a MS SQL. So yeah, all of those connections to external systems is maintained. We will be sharing this recording. Sorry, buddy. I'm just trying to make sure I get to all of your questions here. Let me go into the Q&A section. So there's a question about the run result download off the completed run views. Oh, this model shouldn't be used for that example. Give me one moment. Sure, we'll use this. There are different types of downloadables for any experiment you run. First, when I'm on a particular experiment, so we can see here, maybe I should do it as an end user. I have this download the results button that I don't know why. It's probably something with my personal network. But I have the ability to download all the results. I actually have them saved. I actually have my specified ones. But you could see here, like this is a single run result of what the model version was, inputs, outputs, what the respective data was for all the outputs, because you could see all of these aren't just, some are single values, but some are data sets. I need to analyze all of them. And mind you, this particular Excel file is for one particular run and these particular inputs that we set up for the run. Versus when we are in the completed runs view and we use the download option, that's everything. That's going to be every single view that right now I'm currently viewing, which of course I can say like, well, I only want to download all of the results where there's a time or the profits made is above 10 or $14,000 or $12,000 or what happened here where we made $85,000 in one run. So once again, experiment download view is downloading a specific run. Completed runs download is downloading the current view of your completed runs table. And even one thing you could do as well that I have done in my model is, yes, there's the default download the results. Sorry, Zoom stuff getting in my way. Go here. Right now, I am demonstrating the output for an example model. If anyone who's done training, they're going to be very familiar with this call center model and all the charts we added. And, sure, here's all the outputs for the particular run. But maybe I want to have my own custom one. Maybe I have an Excel file that's local to the model files itself that is more of just a view of just the particular outputs I care about. Maybe I don't need all that extra meta information. Maybe all I care about is with all the runs, what were the number of operators and what were the results that I care about? Number of answered, number of abandoned. Heck, I'm probably going to go with one of, these options because I'm much more pleased with the results. There's a question here about how we can directly connect the results of our simulation runs to a visualization software such as Power BI. Once again, that's all through API. So most of what I've been demonstrating today has all been through the default Cloud UI. But you also have the ability to access these models, run these experiments. And in terms of accessing them with these models, I mean, run the model and view the results with animation, or just give me the outputs of already completed runs. Because I know for a fact the model's already been ran, these experiments have been run. I just want to get the results and view them inside of my Power BI. And mind you, how I would do that is inside of Power BI, I would need to incorporate the respective API. I do not remember what language that Power BI uses off the top of my head. I believe Java. So I would have to use the Java API, make that connection, and then it would speak to my cloud installation and specifically the model I have uploaded, and take all those outputs and return them. I believe I have answered everybody's questions. So thank you everybody for joining us. All the models that I've demonstrated are shared with you via the links, as well as the presentation materials and any other resources. Many of these are just links to our online documentation. So things like for SSO, the instructions are all found just online. Once again, I shared with everybody in the link. It'll also be available with the recording and all the materials as well. So thank you very much for joining us. I look forward to working with anyone who has learned a lot and interested in learning more about SSO and implementing it into their private cloud instance. So thank you everybody for your time.